As you already know, there are some really powerful quirks in My Hero Academia. We're going to do some justice to some of the characters with the most useless quirks, from Hagakuri's invisibility quirk to Mineta's pop-off that makes you a powerful hero in comparison. Number 1. Tail. And let's start with a literal tail. Yeah, in a world where you can literally set the whole world ablaze, Mashiro Ojio's quirk basically, well, just having a tail. And as much as we love this character, his quirk comes a bit underwhelming when compared to some of the other quirks in the show. I mean, sure, having a strong tail can help in combat and with mobility, but compared to quirks like fire control or super strength, it kind of falls short. Next is Naval Laser from Ayama Yuga. Sounds impressive, right? A laser beam from your belly button. But here's the catch. Using it too much gives him a stomach ache, and he needs a special belt to control it. Ayama sure has his uses from time to time, but let's face it, having a stomach ache every time you're using your laser, not really handy when fighting villains. Third on our list is Pop-Off. Mineta's Pop-Off produces sticky balls from his head, and while they can trap enemies, let's be honest, they're not exactly game changers. In a high-stakes battle, sticky balls might not be the most effective weapon, and Mineta often finds himself in over his head. On top of that, if he pulls too many balls, his head starts to bleed. Yikes. Now we have Any-Voice. Kodakochi can talk to animals and ask them for help, which is super cool if there are a lot of animals around, but in many places, this power might not be very handy. In a busy city or against super strong villains, talking to animals isn't the best superpower. However, the cuteness and voice of Koda can overcome any drawbacks, which is why we love him. Next up, we have Invisibility. Being invisible sounds super sneaky and fun, but that's all it does. Hagakuri can't shoot lasers or create explosions. Without other gadgets or friends to help, her invisibility isn't very helpful in a fight. Also, Hagakuri has to be careful about what she wears. Since her clothes don't turn invisible, she's often almost has to be entirely undressed to stay hidden. That can be pretty inconvenient and make things awkward in a lot of situations. Next up is Telescopic from Tatami Nakagame. So this quirk lets Tatami fold parts of her body into themselves, kind of like a human slinky. Sounds like a neat trick, right? But here's the kicker. This quirk is mostly a one-time move. She can dodge an attack by retracting her body, but then she's kinda stuck and can't really do much until she gets herself sorted out. In a fast-paced fight where every second counts, getting stuck isn't exactly a winning strategy. Plus, it's not like she can attack or defend while she's folded up like a lawn chair. If you've seen her in action during the Provisional Hero License exam arc, then you'll know exactly what I mean. Next up on our list is Bubble from Kuroku Awada. This quirk lets her create bubbles filled with different fragrances, something like Jeremy fragrance. And I know it sounds fun. What exactly do you do with a bubble that smells like roses, or worse, rotten eggs? Sure, you might annoy your enemies for a second, but it's not exactly a game changer in the middle of a fight. And let's be real, if your biggest contribution in a battle is creating some mildly inconvenient smells, then you might want to rethink your strategy. Plus, in a world where people are tossing around explosions and manipulating gravity, a fragrant bubble isn't exactly striking fear into the hearts of villains. If you need a laugh, you can see her in action in the Remedial Course arc. So if you had to pick a quirk, would you go for something that might make your enemies wrinkle their nose? Would you aim for something a bit more, well, explosive? This next quirk is a bit more useful than the last one, but it is on this list for a reason. So let's talk about Gecko, the quirk wielded by Shuichi Iguchi, also known as Spinner. This quirk gives him all the abilities of a lizard: wall climbing, enhanced mobility, and even some extra grip. But here's the downside. It also makes him look like a giant lizard, which is the whole reason the whole movement began in the latest season. Discrimination is wild, even in the anime universe. While climbing walls and sticking to surfaces sounds cool, it's not all that impressive when you think about other quirks out there. There are quirks that let people fly, teleport, or create anything out of their body. Compared to those, being able to scale a wall doesn't seem that special. And let's face it, looking like a giant lizard isn't going to win you any style points. And that is the reason Spinner had to get another quirk for All for One. Coming in next is Love, the quirk used by Labrava. On paper, this quirk seems like it could be incredibly powerful. It allows Labrava to give an immense power boost to someone she loves. But here's where things get tricky. This power-up only works if she's genuinely in love with the person, and it only lasts for a short period of time. Plus, she can only use it once a day. While the concept is sweet and shows just how deep her feelings run, the quirk is incredibly situational. It relies entirely on her being in love, and in a world full of battles, having your effectiveness tied to something something as unpredictable as love can be a real disadvantage. So if you don't have a gentle criminal in your team, she is kinda useless. But hey, if you saw her in action during her fight alongside Gentle Criminal in the UA School Festival arc, then you can see her quirk shine. Number 10. Rounding out our list is Water Pump, the quirk used by Backdraft. This quirk essentially turns the user into a human fire hose, allowing them to spray and control water. Now, if you're a firefighter, this quirk is a pretty handy tool, but in the world of heroes and villains, where people are flinging around fire, electricity, and ice, a simple water spray feels a bit underwhelming. The biggest issue with Water Pump is its lack of versatility. Sure, it's great for putting out fires, but it doesn't have much utility beyond that. It doesn't pack a punch in battle, and the amount of water it produces isn't nearly enough to match the scale of other elemental quirks. But what if instead of a human sprinkler, we have Albert Einstein in the show? It must be broken, right? Well, the wielder of the IQ quirk is Psycho Intelli. This quirk allows Psycho to drastically increase her intelligence after drinking tea and closing her eyes. Sounds like it could be super powerful, but here's the catch. It's not as game-changing as it seems. First off, the whole process of needing tea and time to close her eyes makes it less practical in fast-paced situations. In the heat of battle, no one's going to pause for a tea break. Plus, despite her enhanced intelligence, Psycho still managed to get outsmarted by more naturally clever characters, so while IQ might sound impressive, it's not always enough to secure a victory, especially when the user is outmaneuvered by sheer instinct or experience. Now, let's take a look at Larceny, the quirk possessed by Toya Setsuno. This quirk allows Toya to instantly steal any object he can see out of someone's hand. I mean, he would love it in New York. But in the world where you have to defend from Shigaraki, it's not quite as useful. The major downside of Larceny is its reliance on line of sight. If Toya can't see the item, he can't steal it, which makes it easy for opponents to counter. Just cover up whatever you're holding, and suddenly his quirk is pretty much useless. Plus, while it might be handy for disarming someone, it doesn't offer much in terms of direct offense or defense. You can see Larceny in action during the Shie Hasaikai arc, where Toya tries to make the most of his quirk in a high-stakes situation, but is quickly shown to have its limitations. Next up is Stiffening, the quirk used by Shikui Makabe. This quirk allows him to harden any non-living object he touches. It sounds like it could be useful in certain situations. I mean, imagine turning a sheet of paper into a deadly shuriken. But here's the downside. The quirk only works on non-living objects, and the effect isn't permanent. In a battle, stiffening random objects isn't going to turn the tide unless you're incredibly creative or in a very specific scenario where it matters. Plus, you could just as easily carry around a bunch of hardened objects already instead of relying on this quirk. Now, let's zoom in on Zoom, the quirk wielded by Mei Hatsume. This quirk allows Mei to zoom in on distant objects up to 5 kilometers away with incredible precision. While it might sound like a cool ability for scouting or gathering information, it's actually quite limited in its usefulness. For starters, zoom only works if there's nothing obstructing the view, meaning any walls, buildings, or even thick foliage can render the quirk ineffective. Plus, in a world where high-tech gadgets are readily available, Mei's quirk is basically a built-in telescope that can be easily replaced by a pair of binoculars or a drone with a camera. During the sports festival arc, Mei uses her quirk to great effect in showcasing her inventions, but outside of that specific context, its applications are pretty niche. Next in line is Sugar Rush, the quirk belonging to Rikido Sato. This quirk allows Rikido to increase his strength 5-fold for every 10 grams of sugar he consumes. Sounds like a sweet deal, right? But here's where it gets tricky. While he gets a significant boost in power, it only lasts for a limited time, and he risks a sugar crash afterwards that leaves him drowsy and less effective. In the heat of battle, relying on sugar for strength isn't the most practical strategy. Not only does Rikido have to manage his intake carefully, but once the sugar high wears off, he's left vulnerable. This quirk is a double-edged sword, powerful in short bursts, but with a serious downside if not managed perfectly. We see this in action during the final exam arc, where Rikido uses his quirk but struggles with its limitations. Let's give a shout out to Boomerang, the quirk of Itajiro Toteki. This quirk allows Itajiro to curve anything he throws, making it return to him like, well, a boomerang. While it might seem like fun and a very useful ability, especially for precision throwing, it has its limitations. The main issue with Boomerang is that it's highly situational. Sure, it's cool to be able to make anything you throw come back to you, but imagine you're in a closed room where you have to brawl it out. It's kinda useful as a bubble quirk from Iwata, but let's take it outside. The quirk is still dependent on Ichijiro's skill and accuracy. Next on the list is Softening by Juzo Hanenuki. This quirk allows Juzo to soften any non-living object he touches, turning solid ground into a squishy, malleable surface. useless, total opposite of Shikui Makabe. While this might sound pretty useful for setting traps or immobilizing enemies, it is not without its downsides. The biggest limitation of softening is its reliance on the environment. If there's nothing solid around to soften, the quirk is essentially useless. Additionally, while it can disrupt an opponent's footing, it doesn't provide much in terms of direct offense or defense. During the joint training arc, we see Juzo use this quirk creatively, but its effectiveness is very situational and depends heavily on the terrain, and a direct counter to him is anyone who can fly, which all the main characters can do. Now, let's talk about Beast, the quirk of Jiroda Shishida. This quirk allows Jiroda to transform into a hulking beast, significantly boosting his physical strength, speed, and durability. In this form, he becomes a formidable opponent in close combat, with enhanced senses that make him even more dangerous. So, why is he on this list? Well, while Beast provides a massive boost in power, it does come with a few drawbacks. The transformation can make Jiroda more aggressive and harder to control, which might be a disadvantage in situations that require strategy and precision rather than brute force. Additionally, his large size and beastly appearance can make it difficult to maneuver in tight spaces or remain inconspicuous. And the next quirk is the total opposite of raw power. It's Mushroom, the quirky ability of Kinoko Komori. This quirk allows Kinoko to create and spread mushrooms everywhere, which can grow on any surface, including her opponents. While this might sound like a fun party trick, it's a bit questionable when it comes to usefulness in battle. The main issue with mushrooms is that it can cause some inconvenience, like obstructing vision or making surfaces slippery, but it doesn't offer much in terms of direct offense. Additionally, the mushrooms need moisture to grow, which limits where and how effectively the quirk can be used. Even though it can be used creatively to control the battlefield, as seen in the joint training arc, its impact is often more annoying than dangerous. Finally, we have Big Fist, the quirk used by Kendo Itsuka. This quirk allows Kendo to enlarge her hands to massive proportions, significantly increasing her striking power. While this sounds like a straightforward and powerful ability, it also comes with its own drawbacks. The main limitation of Big Fist is its simplicity. While having giant hands can be great for delivering powerful blows or blocking attacks, it doesn't offer much versatility. Kendo's combat style is heavily reliant on brute force, and if she's up against someone with a more nuanced or ranged ability, she might find herself at a disadvantage. During the UA Sports Festival arc, Kendo uses her quirk effectively in close combat, but it's clear that beyond hand-to-hand fighting, Big Fist doesn't offer much in ways of strategic depth. And if she's faced with someone like Gen Tomomachiya, she is as useful as a baby in a battlefield. So there you have it, 20 quirks from My Hero Academia that might be more of a funny challenge than a superpower. They might not be the strongest, but every hero does their best with what they got.